Hi, welcome to part two, where I'm just going to talk about the Observer article. I've just been talking at the end of the last video about how the negative language in this doesn't actually mean they're presenting teens in a negative way. The negative language in this is actually to build a relationship between the adult reader and the adult writer, which then will create a relationship between reader and writer, making them more likely to be swayed towards Barbara Ellen's opinion, which is actually a positive one of the teens. Alright, so let's have a look at this first quotation. With both articles, by the way, I have spaced it out, so if you want to read the full articles and you don't have them to hand, you should have them all from class, but if you haven't got them to hand, they are all spaced out so you can actually see all the articles in full on here. If not, you can type the headlines into Google and you'll actually come up with the websites and the full articles. Well, these are the full articles, but the articles on the website. So let's have a look at this first one. It comes to something when a documentary series featuring yobs, truants, swearing at teachers, swearing by teachers, cyberbullying, teenage pregnancy makes you believe in the education system again. Okay, this is that example. How, does she actually believe they're yobs, truants? I don't think so, personally, because she switches it at the end. She, what they call, juxtaposes her points. She's put them next to each other because they actually contradict each other. This idea of all these all these bad things, but then saying that it makes you believe in the education system again. Maybe that's the extent that she thinks that the media portrays the education system, that even a TV show that isn't that good makes her think that they are actually good. It could show how negatively the media normally portray the education system and teenagers, that a program that isn't perfect improves their opinion. So look at this next one then. Anybody who has ever raised a teacher know how it can feel like the song, with added ringtones. Okay, so we talked about Somme in class, it being a battle within the First World War. So every raised teacher know it can often feel like a battle with added ringtones. So the added ringtones bit is a bit of humour, and also a reference to teens' obsession with technology. And this idea that it can be a battle, well, she doesn't blame anyone, does she? She doesn't say because the teenagers are a certain type of person. It doesn't say it's the adult's fault. It just says that it's a fact of life, that teens go through stages and they're difficult to bring up at times, because they are supposed to push the boundaries. So that's not negative. Let's have a look at the one next to it. I'd stopped glowering at the pupils and started caring about them, wishing them well. Alright, caring about them and wishing them well. So she was starting to feel emotions for them. Now in the Daily Mail article there was no emotion about them. It was just this idea of discipline and that they're badly behaved. No thought of the human behind the behaviour. But she's starting to show that actually people, not just these cardboard cut-out teens wearing hoodies and too much makeup. Okay, let's have a look at this next one about the British. Okay, this bit here. The British hate children. So she's talking about, the head of Bernardo said this. The British hate children, especially teenagers, rushing to brand them feral, writing them off as animals beyond rescue. So again, these negative terms, saying that they're feral and animals beyond rescue, but they're not saying that. It's a negative term, but it's saying that the British hate children, especially teenagers, that British society rushes to brand them this. Not that they are that, doesn't say that they are feral and that they are animals. It says that they're rushing to brand them. So brand has very negative connotations, that you shouldn't brand things. That means like burning their skin, like cows are branded with a number and show that they're part of this, belong to a certain farm, where they're heated with a rod and burned. So that's got negative connotations. So that's negative, to call them feral, this idea of branding them as that. And also rushing. Think about when a teacher tells you you've rushed your work. It's not, it's never praise. It's never, well done, you've rushed your work. It shows that it's a rash thought, that it's not something that's been considered and thought of in full, that you rush to do it. So it's saying that British society hate children, especially teenagers. So it's not saying that the teenagers are to blame. It's actually saying that it's a British society problem, not the teenagers. Not the teenagers. All right, let's move on. All right. There's quite a lot of imagery in this bit, but and you can please read through it and pick through it yourself. I'm just going to focus on this last bit where she's saying, my attitude wasn't pretty. So this is towards teens. She didn't have a good attitude. If one of the first signs of aging is being irritated by the young, I transform to the ultimate short-fused, stony-eyed Methuselah. So Methuselah is a biblical reference to the oldest person that ever lived. So what she's saying, that if the idea of not being irritated by teens is a sign of getting old, then she's the oldest person in the world. She's just exaggerating how much she hated teens. Okay? So, but with the way she's done it, she's not doing it as in it's the teens' fault. She's making a joke at herself. So she's actually making out as if it was her problem rather than the teens, because of the way that it's not saying that the teens caused me to age before my time or anything like that. It's actually saying it's focusing on herself and the negative things within herself, not the idea of the teenagers being bad people. Alright, this next one's a really good key quotation. But as vile as the kid's behaviour often was, the keynote was almost always vulnerability. So, again, starts off with that negative, as vile as the kid's behaviour often was. So, again, creating a relationship with the reader. Also a reference above, Dead Poets Society, Captain My Captain. That's to a film. I'm trying to think when it was. I think it was an early 90s film. I might be wrong with that, but you can look it up. But again, it's something that the reader will have probably would have probably seen. So again, creating that relationship with the reader through common interests, I suppose. But as vile as the kid's behaviour often was, the keynote, so the main reason, the main point, the main reason was almost always vulnerability. So vulnerability is insecurity, the feeling exposed, that sort of thing. As teenagers, obviously we're generalizing a little bit here, but teenagers often do, because you're going through a lot of changes and a lot of social things at that time in your life. So, but she's actually identified this. She's saying that, yeah, all right, sometimes the behavior wasn't perfect, but if we actually look, it's because they're going through a tough time. They're insecure. It's understanding the reasons. Again, it's looking at this idea that they're humans, that they've actually got feelings, problems, issues. Even if now as adults we don't think that they are important, actually to the teenager, to the young person, they're all they know. So it's all relative. How upset you get about something is relative to your life and your experiences. Alright, moving on to this next quotation. If it was human, it was as if human life was at Passmore's, and crucially among an age group that is all too often dehumanized. Alright, this idea of being dehumanized, so not given human qualities, having your human qualities taken away from you, being made to seem like an animal. Again, that's a negative word, but if you look just before it, the key part of this quotation is actually that they're all too often dehumanized, they're all too often be. She's saying that they shouldn't be, dehumanized. Again, if we relate this to the Daily Mail article, this could be related to some of the like wild child, or how they're handled, because in this bit here, it's saying that they shouldn't be made to seem like animals. So it's directly going against what the Daily Mail article does. And now, just to finish of this article, well done, you've been incredibly patient. I've talked an awful lot. I hope you've been noting down some ideas, or thinking about what quotations you'll use. As if educating Essex gave Britain its teens back, or at least offered enough of an insight to make you realise that there may have been a national overreaction to their general awfulness. So it's saying that it's a national overreaction. It's not the teens, it's an overreaction. And then she does this rhetorical question of, will teenagers continue to irritate and horrify the older generations? So this sounds negative, but actually it's not. Daily Mail were pointing the finger at this generation, at that school, at that year group, whereas this article is saying, look, teens are teens. They've always been like that. We were like that when we were younger, and the next generation will be like that, and the generation after that will be like that, and they will always horrify their older generations. Of course they will. It's their calling. And then she uses a bit of teen slang just to add a bit of humour to the end of the article. But hey, you know, whatevs. Alright, so that is an overview of some of the key parts of both those articles. So now you're going to do a response, you're going to do your letter. And this is one way of doing it. So you could discuss the Daily Mail article first in your letter. You could address the editor and say all the things that's wrong with the Daily Mail article. That'd take a few paragraphs, multiple paragraphs, more than one, and also multiple quotations, and plenty of A4 techniques in there to really get your point across, to show your disgust. Really strong piece of work. Then the next kind of section of your piece could be discussing, you could start with something like, not all newspapers have such a negative view of teens. I was reading an Observer article which was based on the exact same program as yours, and well, you get the picture. Again, you would then discuss multiple things about the Observer. You draw some comparisons to what you wrote earlier, saying, the Daily Mail represented teens like this, however the Observer is like that. And you can say, yes, okay, it uses negative language here, but actually the message, the idea and attitude is positive. And again, you'll use quotations from that, multiple paragraphs, more than one paragraph, more than one quotation on the Observer article using your A4 techniques. And then finally, to end the article, you can give your opinions and suggestions. Well, you give your opinions throughout on the quotations and on what the articles are saying, but your final opinions, summary, and suggestions for how the media could move forward in its representation of the teens with the A4 techniques. For that last bit, I do have some prompt questions at the end to get you thinking. The other way you could structure your piece, and this is what I would recommend. I would recommend this because I think it's easier to follow. I would note down, say, 4 or 5 quotations from the Daily Mail article that I was going to use. I would then match them up with 4 or 5 from the Observer that I think fight back at them quite well, that are a counter argument for, or an opposing argument for the Daily Mail one. And I would structure it like this. I would structure how teens are presented in the Daily Mail. I'd use one or two quotations. Again, plenty of A4 techniques. Then I would use one or two quotations from the Observer, saying how that contradicts or goes against what the Daily Mail has done. Again, use quotations, my opinions, plenty of A4 techniques. And then maybe a little bit after of saying how the media, with your ideas in mind, could present teens more positively. And again, your opinion and A4 techniques. I would do this not exact structure, but a version of this 4 or 5 times. I'll just go backwards. 4 or 5 times. I've just done 3 here just to structure it, but so these would be separate points. So the first one might be on how the Daily Mail use animalistic language. The second one might be on how it makes teens look like Barbie dolls. Use better language than I'm doing. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. And then your final one might be on how teens, well, not final one, sorry, your third one might be on something like how the idea of discipline, and your last one might be on the idea of even the positives are followed by a negative, with looking at that last quotation or something like that, or the idea of bullying and the activities that a teenager takes. You know, it's more than bullying, cyber harassment and teenage pregnancy, something like that. So there's plenty of ideas there. Okay, so let me just oops. Alright, let's go past that. So let's just give an example. So I might say something about the Daily Mail, how you make out that teenagers are animalistic creatures who are unruly and need to be handled. I would put unruly and handled in quotation marks. This is not the only time in the article that you refer to them as to teens, us teens, as if we are animals. You later on call a girl a wild child, and then I've gone on to explain that and say my opinions about that. And then I would say when actually the attitude in the Observer article completely contradicts this, when they say that teenagers, or the teenage years, is an age group that is all too often dehumanized. And that is exactly what your article does. It dehumanizes us as teenagers. I'm aware that this video is going on for a long time, so I'm going to try and wrap it up. So these are some questions just to think about your ending your article on something like this. Just because it opens it up into what we call an abstract, looking at the wider picture, the bigger pictures in society. So why would it be more advantageous to present teens in a more positive light? How would it change some teens in our society? So you can admit that not all teens are perfect, but maybe sometimes we act that way because people expect us to. And if actually the media changed their opinion about us and presented us in a more positive light, we would respond more positively. And then think how that could change society in a whole. There's some things to think about. If you're not sure about these, you can discuss them with your parents. Maybe they could have some suggestions on this, or you can come and speak to me about it, and we can have a little discussion about it. I don't want this video to be longer than 20 minutes. Once you've written your piece, please do go back through this success criteria and just make sure that you've addressed everything on there. Okay, good luck. Go back to the articles, get your quotations sorted that you're going to use. Use lots of strong vocabulary, get a strong voice, make your attitude and opinions perfectly clear, but also in a formal way. Use a mix of sentence types, minor sentences, a one sentence paragraph. Okay, and I look forward to reading your pieces. Thank you.